Oh, our camera's changed itself again. See if we can get this fixed. There we go. All right. Are you able to hear me? That's the first question, I guess. Okay, I can't hear you. I don't have any audio
Can you
from
hear me
your
now?
side. There you are.
All right.
Yes. Do I have a lot of lag? Am I doing okay? I'm showing slow internet, so.
I hear you. If you can hear me right away, then yeah, I don't think you have much lag.
I'm seeing a little bit. We should be okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Abnormal Investigations. Today we have a special guest. Deborah Hatswell is going to be joining us today. I've been excited to speak with her over some of her. She has a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, and we've been talking about this, me and Jesse, a little bit about everything that she's done and all the reports that she's fielded and her boots on the ground. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting show. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. And we're going to go ahead and bring Deborah on, and we'll jump right into this one. I've been excited for this.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Hello. Nice to meet you,
Hello.
Deborah. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Nice to meet you both too.
Nice to meet you. I've been watching you
Jen.
for a long time, so I'm excited.
It's a little. I would imagine to a lot of the Americans watching, it's a bit strange. Somebody from the UK like myself having so much knowledge, but I've had a very unique journey in the cryptid world, kind of thing.
Yes. Yes.
I never even knew that y'all actually had cryptids over there until, I found your channel and I kind of seen some of the things you were dealing with. And I was like, wow, these things are everywhere.
I was the same. I mean, before I had an experience. I'd never even heard of Bigfoot or anything like that. Nothing like that in the UK back then. And now it's completely the opposite. I mean, I've sat down today and I've taken 3 new accounts from people in the UK. Things that have happened to them in the past that they're now rethinking. Because, like most people, we are under the impression that there are no cryptids here in the UK, and they're in every country of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm amazed too at how many people are actually coming out now, remembering and understanding that they had experiences in the past and are now putting things together and are able to come forward and talk about it.
I think it shows how the tides turn, doesn't it? It's a big subject here in the UK. I can't actually access the chat, unfortunately, but I can see a lot of my listeners in there, and they tune into you guys every week. And I think then you start to notice the patterns and what you guys over there are finding, and what we're finding, and what's reported in across the pond, and they're very similar. I mean, the dogman creatures reported here are no different to the ones that are reported in the US or Canada or France or, Russia. Wherever you go in the world, we have these experiences with these like dog-headed creatures, yet it's not spoke about. It's supposed to be something that's a bit hush-hush and a bit shameful. So go in the corner over there and talk about it. It's a bit like that in the UK. And I'm the opposite of that. I think we should just shout as loud as we can until somebody listens.
Of course, yeah. I was just listening to one of your shows where you had fielded a report, even in regards to the Black Panther type cats too, which we have a lot of that over here, where they tell us they're not here yet. A lot of people are seeing them, catching them on their field cameras and such like that too. And I think it's amazing that they're not talked about more and they keep that hidden from us.
Sorry, but if hunters are seeing them and fishermen are seeing them and hikers are seeing them, then it's their word that you take for granted, because they're the guys out in the field, aren't they, seeing these things, and not just seeing big cats, but seeing pug marks of cat hair. There's 3 positive DNA samples in the UK for leopard, and our government still refuses to admit that they're here.
That floors me. It's
We've had policemen attacked by them. Actual policemen that have been attacked by large cats, and the government won't take them on. And there again, I've had reports from policemen who've seen 7-foot tall dogman like creatures, and they've just been ignored.
And a lot of the police officers over there, do they actually acknowledge that and talk about it openly? Because a lot of them here don't do that.
No, not at all. It's still a very, they want the story told, because it's probably something that's been gnawing away at them. For say they were a teenager, like a man I spoke to today, he was 18 when it happened to him, and he's in his 50s now, and he's always second guessed himself about what happened to him that day. And he's he's a serving police officer, and he said he would have lost his job He would have, if he'd have come forward and, you know, said, when I was younger, this happened, he would have lost his job. So it's just, it's different. It has changed, but there's still that stigma to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay to see a ghost, or it's okay to see a UFO. But seeing a cryptid creature is completely, you know, out of the world. And I'd love to change that. I really want to normalise it, you know, because those subjects were once taboo, weren't they? And you know, you didn't really speak about them. And now it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, one of my first.
Sorry, Matt, I didn't mean to interrupt you then. It was just because of the same floor.
No.
We've had a case here in the UK in the last 2 years where a woman has been found dead in a field with nothing on her feet after going missing, and our government and police said it was foxes.
Wow.
What?
Wow. You know, it kind of reminds me of the Brenda Hamilton. You know, she was partially consumed, left in the ditch, was still alive when they found her, and the police actually put in the report that she wasn't very cooperative during the interview. She was partially eaten, left in a ditch of water, and about 3 days earlier, they had received a 911 call to the police department, and a person had actually reported there was a large black creature walking bipedally in the same area that she was attacked, and then she later died at. So,
right. And just is it unsolved? The case just unsolved?
Yeah. No, there is no answer.
Yeah, the same here. Her car was abandoned, even though it wasn't. The circumstances were, it was December, but it was quite mild. It wasn't like thick snow or anything like that. And it's on the coastal area, and you know yourself in the coast. At night when it's dark, you can see the lights of the houses, can't you, and the town. And there's a huge aerospace base there that was completely lit up. And she said to have run in the opposite direction into the dark fields. The car wasn't registered to her, which is illegal here in the UK. She's never been named, and the case has been closed now as no suspicious circumstances. But there are, and this has not made it into the newspapers. I had to research this myself. There are 4 other missing people in that very small town. One of them went within 3 weeks of her. Never been found. That's only 2020.
Wow. Yeah, that's not a coincidence.
It's
something there.
It's a very small Scottish town, you know, on the edge of the coast. So 4 missing people like that in those circumstances is just outrageous, but it's never hit the newspapers.
Yeah, they like to keep it quiet. That's for sure.
And then whenever it does, you know, they always make up, you know, something else. Down on the lake, they had found some juveniles, you know, and they were stuffed underneath a log, and debris was placed over them like they were hidden. But whenever you look in the report, they never mention it. They just say that they, you know, had a boating accident and they succumbed to, you know, hypothermia. But they don't ever go into, you know, the firemen and the police officers that are saying, how were they that far away from the water? How were they underneath a log? How was all these leaves and stems, you know, how was all that placed on top of them? But nobody ever asks that. Nobody ever asks the questions, you know. It's just simple, you know, regular report, you know, case closed.
I mean, it makes me, I've got to be honest, I think the opposite applies. I think the government know. I think they're very well aware of it. And that's why they cover things up, you know. It'd affect money. It'd affect logging and mining and tourism. It would affect the dollar, and that they're not going to put up with that, are they?
And then could you imagine all the liability they would face, you know, if they was to come out and say we knew these existed? They would be liable all the way back, you know. They know better. They know they can never, you know, tell you what's out there. And plus the government, they're not going to tell you about something that they can't control. If they can't control it, then they're not going to tell you about it.
Here in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in America, we have a lot of air bases, military defence bases, and there are a lot of cryptid reports around those bases. And there's a famous one in the UK, RAF Alconbury, because serving American soldiers came here and were stationed at the base in the 70s and the 80s. And they described what they saw as a standing wolf. Now, it was seen by different people at different times, so it wasn't like a one-off sighting with a crowd. Several airmen at the base, one of which was actually within a plane on exercises, and just refused to get out. He refused to get out of the cockpit because of what he's seen. And those soldiers went home to America and reported what had happened to them to the Americans over there. So in the UK, it was very, I think there was probably 4 or 5 lines about it. And there was one guy called John Kifton who really went deep into the case. And then we found some English witnesses as well from the area. And so I like to map. I like to put any sighting I find on a map so I can kind of see what's happening in an area. And in each and every one of the 7 cases, the animal, as they called it, ran off to the north into the North Woods. So 7 different people saw it at 7 different times, but it did exactly the same thing. So that's its escape route, isn't it? And that's a nature reserve, So it must still be out there.
Oh, of
roaming,
course.
Roaming the UK, and people are seeing it.
Yeah.
It's almost like they come out and they watch us and they look for an opportunity, and they have their escape route, for if that opportunity arises, they're going to strike, and they know their way that they're going to get out of there.
I'm often sent photographs of like survival shelters, human built things, and people will say that it's a birthing den or something. And I always say there's no animal, including us humans, that will birth in an area where we haven't got a backdoor escape, because you'd just be too vulnerable at that time, wouldn't you? You really, really would. And we've done a lot of work into looking at like subterranean, like the old mine shafts, the mines that run throughout the country and everything. And that seems to play a part here in the UK. There's reports of them subterraneanly. And I know it's the same in the US, that people see them in mountainous areas and are often seen crossing the mountains. And when you think about the US, there's 3 mountain ranges, isn't there, that run down, and each and every one of them is absolutely clustered with Bigfoot reports, and I think they're just crossing terrain, following the deer and the elk as they go, and then us humans see them and interact with them. I think the dogman species are very different indeed. I think they can go wherever they want, because they show some signs of I don't like the word paranormal, it doesn't fit, but I've spoken to witnesses who've seen the creature just literally vanish in front of their eyes. So not hide, but just vanish. And I don't know if that's an ability of some kind or something we just don't understand as a human, we just don't understand it. But just basically melding back into the greenery, and they've gone.
Well, there's been quite a few reports of the Bigfoots doing that as well, and just disappearing.
Just completely vanishing, yeah. And then you get those reports where there's just like one footprint in the middle of a snowy field.
Right.
And how? How does that happen? And you just think there's far more to them than we understand, and us humans, we fear what we don't know, don't we? I mean, I did. That's what drove me to do what I do now, was just abject fear. So some people say, was it like an epiphany, or like seeing something magical? No, it was not. It was horrible. It was awful, and I wouldn't do it again if you paid me money. But it's put me where I am today, and there's not a week go by where I don't speak to somebody else from the UK or from abroad who says to me, look, I saw the same thing this year. I've been in that situation and nobody believed me either. And like, what do you do about it after all these years? Well, there's nothing I can do about it, is there? Now, there's no way I can prove what I saw back then, but I've spent 42 years trying to prove what I saw back then to people,
Yeah. Yeah. I find it amazing too. The more, since I've gotten into this, the more people that I run into and start talking to about it, once I say, oh, like, what do I do, and kind of the research that I do myself, they're like, oh, actually, yeah, I got to tell you something. They tend to open up, people that would never come forward and say something, on their own. And then I find that amazing.
I think it's the same for me. I've never. People always expect that I've had an enormous amount of ridicule, and that comes with the job. Obviously, that's what you do. But it's the opposite. In fact, it's rarely I get an awful email or an awful message, but I'll get consistent messages from people who are like, "Oh, I've stumbled across you on YouTube," or I've seen one of your articles, and for an example, where I had my report, it happened in 1982. And I did find other people in the meantime. But people on YouTube said to me, "Will you sit down and speak about it?" So I just made a video of myself talking about it. And there's a woman got in touch with me from my town who was within a mile of where it happened. Same time of year, 1982. And she saw something in her grandmother's house. And she said people asked her if it was a werewolf. And she said, no, it was far more hideous than that. But for all those years, I was alone, and she was alone, and yet we both saw the same thing. We were both teenage girls. So now it's amazing because you could jump online and we could have a conversation, But back then, you're in a working class town, so like blue collar, normal town, pit, mill, the docks, typical mining town, and yet you see a monster in the bushes. She's just not in the middle of nowhere. So nobody ever believed me, and that just drove me on, But there's so many other people in my town who've seen it and gone, I've seen that. Oh, well, there used to be a story about a gorilla man down there. Well, where were you then? Where were you in the 80s when I needed you, Why didn't you come forward then, kind of thing?
Right.
Yeah, same thing. Ridicule, isn't it? Just fear of ridicule. But yeah, it's not as bad as they think when they come forward.
I think there's a huge misconception too that these creatures are only in wooded areas and they don't come into towns where people are living and are active, and they don't realize what could actually be lurking in the shadows, and they don't even know.
Exactly that. I mean, I get thrown at me all the time. The UK is a very small place. It's impossible. Less than 10% of the UK is urban, and that includes roads, hospitals, the whole nine. Less than 10%. So you've got a lot of arable and what we call green belt land. So it's just off from the town. So there's farms out there, a lot of woodland, a lot of streams, really nice place to be. And we encroach on them ever more than you do in America. You get new developments and you push further and further into the wilderness. So you are going to come into contact more and more with these creatures because they're following routes that they followed, like a bear, that they have followed genetically for millennia. And we then go and build right in the middle of that. So they have to adapt, don't they? They have to work out a way of getting from A to B around that town. So anybody, say, out hunting within a mile or two of that town or jogging or driving on the road have the opportunity to see them. Now, what shocks me is the amount of people who see them. And if that creature had just hidden for 10 seconds, they wouldn't have seen it. But it stepped out into the road, or it stepped under the deer stand, or it was seen at the back of someone's yard. And you think, are they showing themselves on purpose?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, why do you think they do that? You think they do that on purpose?
I honestly, I don't know, but it absolutely puzzles me. I think, why did it just not wait in the woodland? Like, you guys will have heard of Sherwood Forest. Everybody knows Sherwood Forest. And there are a couple of UK wildman reports within the forest, and they're on the same stretch of road. And one lady was driving home from work. It was 5 p.m, so it was nice and sunny. And she said what looked like a father and son, almost caveman-like, completely naked, hair covered, stepped out of the woodland onto the side of the road. And she looked and she saw them. Why didn't they just wait for her car to go past and then step out into the road? Just absolutely puzzling. Why? Was she meant to see them? Is there some form of connection there? And then what I do now is my boots on the ground days are over and done with. I've done my my woodland research. I want nothing to prove to anyone anymore. When people come to find me, they've done all of that. And they're like, right, Deb, what do I do? How do I put this to bed? I can't, what do I do with it? And then I'll just get them talking to other people about it, things like that. But everything changes from what you thought was happening when you had the sighting. So you get all this evidence, and then at the end of it, you're like, I've changed. I don't have the same opinions that I had back then. And then talking to get people like you, when you said last night that you and your nephew were like shadowed by something within the woodland. Mike, do you remember me telling me that last night when we were on the line?
Yeah, we went down. The water was down. We was having a drought here, a really bad drought. We hadn't had a drought like that in years. And my mom and them, when they were younger, they lived at my granny's house. These creatures were at my granny's when my mom and them were children. So they dealt with it as children, and then I dealt with it growing up at my granny's. But we had went to the lake. I had my son and nephew with me, and we were walking around where the water had receded, and we were picking up like shells, and they were finding, little trinkets and stuff they wanted to bring home, and we were just having a fun day. And there's a wood line that would have been north of where we was at, and it was probably 200 yards. And we're walking, and my nephew, he starts pulling on my arm, and he's like, Mike, look. And I look, and it's a pack of coyotes. And I told him, I said, we're okay, buddy. They're more afraid of us, than. So he's like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, we're fine. So we continued doing what we was doing, and we started walking back to the truck. The sun was starting to go down. It was starting to get late evening, and we're headed back to the vehicle. And my son has a fit. He starts pulling on my arms, screaming, Dad, look, Dad, look, Dad, look. And then my nephew starts having a fit, and I turn around and I look. And whenever I look, the coyotes that were in the pack, they're now standing on their hind legs. And the weird thing was, there was a larger one. He wasn't a lot larger. He wasn't like a monster beast, but he was bigger than the rest. And what he had done is, we have a lot of locust trees down there, and they have a lot of thorns on them, really big thorns. He ran, jumped up on that tree and climbed it, and started just shaking the tree violently. And kids were having a fit. I mean, they were, so I told them, I was like, just keep going for the truck. Just keep going for the truck. I had my pistol with me. I was like, keep going for the truck. It was really bothering me, because I knew with my pistol that I was limited in the range that I could defend them. And I got them to the vehicle, but the whole time that we were going across the opening, they were paralleling us, but they were staying in the wood line. They never came out all the way into the open, but they paralleled us all the way. And then when we got into the truck, I went to start the truck and to leave and everything. And that's whenever the big one, he let out kind of like a yell, scream at us, and we left. I mean, we was glad to be gone.
So that situation then, where were you meant to see them? Because they could have stayed hidden, or was it because the children saw them because they're on a different eye level, that they then know that they've been seen, and that's why they've kind of followed you, shadowed you out of the area? That's what I tend to call it, making sure that you leave the area.
Another weird thing, and you might find this pretty interesting too, is when my mom and them were living at my granny's, and these things were around the house, they weren't always there. They ended up showing up after my uncle had went on a spook hunt with his girlfriend, and they had an encounter with something that had jumped on their vehicle. They came home that night, had fish scales all over their vehicle. It stunk really bad. Everything started happening from that point forward. But there was one particular night, my grandma would sit in her chair with her door opened, and her door would look through her front porch, and she had that door open, and then down the steps, and there was a sidewalk that had the shade trees over it, and there was a yard light at the end on the circle drive. Well, the light didn't really come through real good, but you could see shadows, under. One night, this thing steps up on the sidewalk, and it puts its hand out like this, and it starts saying her name over and over at her up through the door. And I've heard him speak one time, and that's what I was going to ask you, if you'd ever heard him speak or anyone report to you of him speaking.
Yeah, I haven't heard them speaking, but yes, lots of reports. Very similar situation to yourself. That's called the hitchhiker effect. So you have the initial encounter, and then things start to happen around the home, and those things kind of ramp up each time. So yeah, we definitely do have them. The gentleman not too far from me was fine, walked that woodland absolutely fine every day until 2017. Things started to change around that time. And he felt like he'd intruded on something, and he had his name said, and other examples of, say, his daughter was at home and he was out, and something was slapping on the side of the building, but he had security lights and a security system, and it didn't set it off. And it actually shouted a word at him. It shouted the word "yod," and we went and looked it up in Old English, and it means to go or to travel away. So something was literally telling him to go. And it got that bad, Mike, that he felt physically sick, like he wanted to drop to his knees. And he started noticing these structures that would appear almost overnight, really, and disappear. We've got this kind of theory in the UK that some of the structures that you see and get reported are on points of energy. So they're almost working like a pyramid to enhance that energy. So we put an audio device within it. And when he sent it over to me, he caught running footsteps. You can hear that snarling growl that you mentioned, really unusual bass, so you can feel it. But I couldn't hear it over the noise of the water. And I said that to him, and he said, it isn't water. It's nowhere near water. It's like this gurgling energy sound. You know, as water trickles over rocks, it sounds like that, but it's coming from a wooden structure in the middle of a woodland, which is just highly impossible. But yeah, he had his name spoken. So many cases. I mean, we had a chap only 18 months ago, and he's passed away, sadly. And it came to the window of his home. And he said it hit, rapped on the window with what he described as something between a hand and a paw. And he was almost in his 80s. He was incredibly sick when it happened to him. And we were fortunate that his carer actually sat down and interviewed him the next morning. So we got him talking about it on tape. And he said it was literally looking in the window at him, and it looked surprised that he'd seen it. And that made me think, well, how many times it had been on the property and he hadn't seen it. And that night, Jess, they brought him downstairs. He couldn't do the stairs anymore. So they brought his bed downstairs, and that was the first time he slept on the lower level. And that was the night that he saw it. Yeah, It's absolutely terrified, poor man. But you would be, wouldn't you? Seeing that, you would go.
Oh, whenever we would go to my granny's, she was like my second mom. I was really, really close to her. And she would babysit me a lot and stuff while my mom worked. So it was like my second home. And I remember we were so scared at night. I mean, me and my cousins, we would cry when that stuff would start happening, because it would rattle the doorknobs. It would slap on the house. You could hear it breathing. My granny had a stroke, and my mom was staying, the girls, there's 8 kids. They were taking turns taking care of her. And, I was staying with my mom that night. I was probably 16, somewhere around that. And I laid in the bed that my mom normally would have slept in. There was an old water cooler in that window. And the old water cooler, you could kind of see around it the light, of the porch light.
Yeah.
And while I was laying there, I noticed that the light got blocked out, like something outside had stood in front of that crack. And the next thing I know, it starts saying my mom's name through the water cooler. It sounded like a dog trying to whisper, kind of, and it was going like K. It kept saying my mom's name through that water cooler. And man, talk about terrified. I mean, that just, of course we called my dad and my uncles and all, and they came down with their guns and flashlights. But I mean, it was a bad place. It really was. I mean, there was times that you didn't want to be there. And it would whistle at us. My little cousin was playing outside one day, and it stuck its hairy arm out of the field, and it tried to get her to come over to it, Luckily, she cried and ran in the house because it scared her, and she didn't go to it. I mean,
Yeah,
if
naturally.
she would have went to it, she might have been gone.
That's it. I mean, that's absolutely traumatic, isn't it? That must be awful as a child having to live through in that situation. I spent a lot of time at my grand, so I get exactly what you mean. That's your safe place to be, isn't it? Your grandparents' home.
Right.
It's like, for most kids, it's your safest place, and you don't expect to be frightened there, do you? It must be much. It's much worse, I think, when it happens near your home. So if you've, like me, at least I was away from the home. It didn't stop me thinking he was coming for me. It completely, honest to God, Mike, it completely changed my life. So my grandparents were really outdoorsy. So even when we had to, we were forced to move into an apartment, like a flat, as we call it in the UK, we still had a pond on the balcony. And at times we had a pig and we had geese, and chickens. And my granddad had a yard full of it. So we were always out fishing or doing something in nature, always, all of the time. And for all we were poor, we were rich in, other ways, if you get what I mean. So travel the country with my parents, and we'd fish, and just amazing times. And times in Ireland that when we were in Ireland that, I'd love to go back and recreate. But the minute I saw him at 15, that stopped for me. I refused to go anywhere where he could be. So if there was trees there, there's just no way. I hate towns. I absolutely hate towns. I'm not the type of person that can be in a crowd. Well, that's exactly what I did there. I made sure that I moved where there was loads of people, and I refused to speak about it. I was absolutely shamed to death that it happened to me. Like, I brought it on myself, in some way. And I tried broaching it with people, but they just eye-rolled me and made me feel like a complete nut job, And it took me probably 25 years to get over that and actually start to go back into the woodland again. That's the effect it had on me. And he didn't do anything to me. He just looked at me like I'm looking at you. But he shouldn't have been there. There's no way he could have been there. But he was. And I'm still connected to that place. I'm 58 now, and I was 15 when it happened. And there is no way I could stay in there at night on my own. Not a chance. I'll go to woodlands all across the UK and meet with people who are terrified by the cryptids that they encounter. And I will go into that woodland and I will change all that for them. But I can't go back there and be on my own probably more than 10 minutes, and I would melt. That's how the effect that it had on me.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I also had for you, I don't know, have you ever heard of anybody report to you, or have you ever experienced, like my mom, whenever she was living at my granny's when this first happened, she was probably, 12, 13 years old, I think, somewhere around there. She was going up, they had a sidewalk, and they had the shade trees over it, and had real big concrete steps that went up to an enclosed porch. And the porch was enclosed with plexiglass, so you could see out from the halfway up. Whenever she was going up the steps, she said she looked to her right, and below the steps beside the porch, she said the best way she could describe it was a werewolf was looking at her. She said that's the only way she knew how to describe it. But after that happened, it was always worse when my mom was there. It always would call my mom's name. If my mom goes fishing, even right now, if we go fishing at night, try to night fish, if my mom goes, it'll be hell. But if I go with just my regular friends and stuff, it'll be okay sometimes. It's really weird.
Was she about, say, 13 to 16 when she saw it through the plexiglass? How old was she?
Mom, you was about what, 13? She said maybe even younger. But it looked up over the step at her when she was walking up the steps. It was like right there.
Yeah, and she was definitely meant to see it, wasn't she? I can validate that. There's a case in Sweden, young girl, completely same situation, really. She was out with her mum in the field, and mum sent her back to get something from the house. And as she was getting it, she looked through the window and she said he looked like a werewolfen, as he would say in Sweden, so a man of a wolf. And she said he just watched her. He didn't try to do anything to her, but he just watched her. And they were in a really remote place, and then she started to have things happen around the home. There's two theories on it. Some people see them as an absolute foe and like a stalker, and that they stalk you and follow you throughout life. Yet others see them almost like a guide. And I've even spoken to women who have had interaction as younger girls and then have kind of been in situations later on where that creature's actually come and saved them, or thinking about it has given them the strength to get out of that situation. So these are really confusing. Are they our friends or are they our foe? They say our names. They will sound like children crying. That's kind of ambushy. That's kind of, it's like almost like the old tales of the fae, as we say in England, like the old fairy tales. If you hear your name in the wood, don't follow it. Don't beckon it in, because it'll go ever deeper. And so it's almost like that, isn't it? Like a skinwalkery kind of. What was its connection to mum? Is there any Irish blood in your mum?
We are Irish.
That's the answer. We should have started there. We should have started there. Right. The tales in Ireland with werewolves and wolf-headed men go back to the 1st century. So they have a great juxtaposition together. They run throughout the oral history and the written history. And do you remember when I told you about the old guy who, his name was Fred, who lived in the farm and he was ready to pass away, and he saw the werewolf at the window? I asked him 4 questions. I said, were you of Irish descent? What was different about that night? Had you been thinking about your death? What was the 4th one? It was the 4th one. It'll come to me in a moment. And yes, Irish parents, mum and dad. He had been thinking about his death. He contacted his lawyer, who was putting his affairs in order, getting everything settled, before he went. He knew he was ill and he knew what was coming. And what was different was they brought him downstairs that night. And in Irish tradition, there is what they call a death wolf, and it's not as frightening as it sounds. Some people believe when you see it, it's like the banshee. It's somebody in your family's going to die. But other people see it almost like a creature that comes to walk you home, that will keep you safe while you're at your weakest, almost. And Fred knew that he was near the end and that he was weak, and he thinks that that's why he saw it. And I believe that that's why he saw it as well. And he did. He passed away within a couple of weeks after that. But it's that Irish connection. Now, it doesn't matter how many generations have passed or where you go within the world, your DNA is your DNA. Right. So it could be your mum's Celtic blood that is kind of connected her to this creature. Is she sensitive in other ways? Is your mum a bit of a knower? Can she meet a person and know whether she likes them or not instantly?
Yeah, usually, yeah. She'll say that's a good person or that's a bad person, or she'll say I don't trust that person.
Because she gets a feeling about them. She's very empathic then, yeah. I think it could be connected to that. I think it might be connected to mum's heritage and the fact that it's showing itself to mum so visibly, if you get what I mean. He could have been a shadow or, darting really quickly. And I would imagine at times she's seen things out the corner of her eye as well. And it all seems to be connected. And you're her son, so you got the same blood as her, and it just follows down generation. So what I'll do, Mike, with the witnesses, when you talk to them, you get the initial report, the reason they've contacted you. You get all of that down. And then when they're ready to talk next, we take them back. And I'll say, like, what was there anything? Did mum see anything, or dad, or grandma, or granny? And there's normally a pattern, and it might not be the same thing. It might not be a cryptid, but they might have had a paranormal experience or experience with UFO or something like that. And I'm honestly convinced it's simple. It just runs in our bloodlines. It really, really does. Because that feeling that your mum has, that knowing, that intuition, that kept you alive back in the day. We didn't reason it away. We're the only animal on the planet that doesn't trust its gut instinct. And if you're in a woodland and your brain says, run, we will push it as
Right.
humans. We will push that down and push on in, and we shouldn't be doing that, you know. And I think your mum's probably, because she's so connected to nature, and she's got that Irish heritage, and I think that's probably why mum's having interaction with him. But why does he want her attention? I mean, that's the thing. Why? Why is he saying her name? Why is he trying to draw her out?
There was one particular night we was staying with my granny after she'd had her stroke, and she had a lamp beside her bed, and it was one of those touch lamps. You could touch it, you know, and it'd be dim, brighter, brighter, bright. And Granny would always leave it on at night on the dim so she could see in her room. And she had a bell. She had like a brass bell, and she would ring the bell when she needed somebody, and they would go to her. One night, my mom heard the bell ring, and my mom got up and she went into her room, and Granny was asleep, so she thought she'd fell back asleep. So we went back to bed. I was staying with Mom that night. It rings the bell again. Mom goes in to check on Granny. Granny's asleep. So instead of going back to bed, we stood just a little ways back off into the other room watching.
Yeah.
And then we hear the bell outside. It was ringing the bell to watch my mom walk past the window to check on Granny. So, man, that really weirded us out. That was like, that's a lot of intelligence, you know, to do that.
Yeah, and what, you know, what's the connection there, kind of thing.
Right.
Jess is a female, she's like me. And I worked with a lady in the Scottish Borders, Jess. And when she was a young girl, she was about 14, she actually saw something in the garden of her home. She said it was incredibly big and thick and black. And being the type of girl that she was, she actually shouted at it and went, don't you dare scare me. Don't you ever do that again to me, kind of thing. And she was frightened, but it came out, and she set her boundaries with it, and it kind of seemed to settle down. And she was very lucky that when she had a chat with the parents about it, and mum kind of just said, yeah, you see it around, and they kind of caught glimpses of it on the field when they'd been walking the dog and things like that. She gets this neighbour, this older male neighbour, who starts to become really inappropriate with her, to the point where he broke several laws. And he was actually, the police had to get involved in it. It was so bad. He was putting letters through her door telling her what he was going to do to her and all this kind of thing. And they didn't move him. They kept him in that property. And she had horses. So as you know, you got to see to your horses early morning and late on at night. And she said she would be terrified. Walking down there, having to walk past his property to go and see to her horses, she would absolutely be terrified, like heart in her throat. And one night she'd asked her boyfriend to come with her, and she said he was playing on the Xbox or whatever, and he didn't come. And she said, I felt quite annoyed about it, and she stormed out and she's gone to the field, and she said, I look back when I'm seeing to getting the hay, and there's a light bobbing along the field, and she's thinking, oh my God, he's come for me, he's going to get me. What can I do? There's nothing I can do. And she said, I steeled myself, and it was a boyfriend. And he said that when he was at home, something growled in his face and told him basically to get down there and go and help her.
Oh, that gave me chills.
Wow.
You know? And that's what happened. That
Wow.
She said it growled in his face. So that, to me, that's not something that's got any ill will towards you, is it? He's almost, he saved her. You know, if they'd have been that neighbour, it would have been a very different thing. But he actually had probably, how's he not seen it though? It's in his house, right in front of him, screaming in his face, but he can't see it.
Right.
Yeah, that's
and he's doing that to save somebody. It's just a complete mystery, isn't it, all around?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. When my mom lived down there was a guy that was a younger guy, and he was a really big guy, and he was like the big guy of the town. Nobody could beat him up. He was a tough guy, wasn't scared of nobody, the real tough guy. And he told my granny, he's like, I'll come down and get rid of it for you. He thought it was just some pervert messing around the house.
Yeah.
And Granny was like, no. Yeah. She's like, you don't want to do that. Well, he did come down. And that night, Mom said it would happen at about 8:30 every night. You could just about set your clock to it, that it would show up.
Right.
and it showed up. And my granny would dump her scraps out the back door into a hog trough because my grandpa
Yeah.
was gone logging, and he always told her, "Don't go out, just dump them out the back door." Well, it arrived. He jumps off the couch, and he runs outside and he runs around the back of the house. He's going to take care of this guy. And he walks in the front door, they said, and he just falls on the couch as white as his t-shirt. And they all asked him, they're like, "What did you see?" And he wouldn't talk about it. When I started doing this on YouTube, it would have been like, I can't remember, it was like 40 years later or something like that, after he had done that at my granny's. He didn't tell nobody what he saw. So I reached out to him to see if he would tell me what he had saw at my granny's, because I wanted to know. And he wouldn't talk about it, but he ended up getting sick, and he knew that his time was short. So he wrote me a letter explaining what had happened that night. And he said that it changed his whole life. He said when he came around the corner of my granny's, he said, "I came around the corner really fast expecting to find somebody." And he said, what I saw was a werewolf standing there. And he said it was reaching down into those nasty scraps that your granny had been dumping out. And it was shoving them, not in the front of its mouth, but in the side of its mouth. And he said it was running all down it, like it had the food slop all over it. And he said it cocked its head at me. He said, I don't know if it smiled or it growled, but it showed its teeth. And it said, hello. And he said, I ran. He said, I ran as hard as I could run. He stopped hunting. He stopped fishing, and he moved to the city.
It's understandable, isn't it? People don't, they want the story. It's great to hear the story, but they don't see the trauma behind it. There's I think it's Slave Lake in BC. I spoke to a guy there called Randy, lived there his entire life. Bear guide, so he knows he's outdoors. He's off grid, he gets his own food, whole 9 yards. Lovely chap. I spoke to him about 2017, something like that, and he said that what happened to him, what he saw that day, changed everything for him, to the point that his friends wouldn't come out and hunt with him, because they were worried that it would happen to them. He said what happened was he would go into the area. He was near Slave Lake and he was hunting that day. He was out looking for moose. He said, and obviously I walk in, I park the car way, and you walk in a few miles and you just keep walking. He said, and when you get to the spot, you're just glassing all of the time, just looking all of the time for that moose. You're looking for that buck antler. He said, and after a while, everything goes quiet. If you're in the muskeg, it quiets down. The small creatures start moving, and then the bigger ones will. And that's what he was waiting on. He said, and as he was probably there about 45 minutes, this moose just comes screaming. He said he'd never heard an animal make the noise that it was making. And there was, he didn't give it a name. He said there was a creature on the back of this moose, and it was just swatting at the moose's head, like just knocking it, trying to set the moose down, and nothing was happening. He said the moose's eyes were rolling and its back legs were giving way. He said this ape-like thing put its hand underneath the moose's neck and bent its head back, and down it went. And he said, I had the gun in my hand and I never thought about using it at any point. He was just completely paralyzed. And he said he doesn't remember getting out of the woods. He just remembers pulling up. He said his exact words were, I remember pulling up when I hit tarmac, and he just had his head in between his hands, and he said he just cried. He just absolutely cried. He didn't know what to do. And he went home and he tried telling people, and they thought he was mad. They kept saying to him, oh, it's just a bear. He's been a bear guide most of his adult life. He wouldn't mistake a bear. You know what I mean? He's not some city slicker that's come out for a weekend. This guy does this to fill his freezer, and he's still got a family to feed. So he's still got to go out and do it. And I don't think he'd gone to a number of people in America and tried to get them to listen, and they weren't interested. It was out of their remit, you know, because he didn't say Sasquatch, or he didn't say Bigfoot,
right?
But he didn't have any knowledge of that beforehand to use those words. So he had to tell his story to me in the northwest of England. Just doesn't make sense.
But
You know.
what's also weird too is my granny's dad was full blood Cherokee. He was a full blood, and he spoke Cherokee fluently. And they would always tell me, and I always thought that it was kind of weird. And I wish I would have asked more questions, but I was young. But they always told me when the Bigfoot would come around, and there was different things at Granny's. There wasn't just Bigfoot. There was a dog man, and there was other things that were there. And they would always say, if you leave the Bigfoot alone, most of the time he's not going to bother you. He might throw a stick at you, might whistle at you, but he's just going to watch you. But then they would turn around in the same breath and they would say, but now those other things, they'll kill you. Don't mess with them. And it just send chills all over your body because you knew that night, you were going to be at Granny's and it was going to be there, and it was going to be, I mean, as a kid, it's terrifying when you're sitting there and you see the doorknob trying to turn, and what's running through your mind is, what if that doorknob fails and that door opens? What am I going to see, and what is it going to do?
I thought the same. I thought he was just going to reach out and grab me and sack me, and I'd be gone. Nobody'd know. They just think that I'd just vanished off the face of the earth, kind of thing. And it was near my school. I had to go back the next day. I was absolutely terrified. And like you as a kid, even though I knew he couldn't get near my house, being in bed at night, I'd just terrified that he'd be out there, and there was no way he could have been. But in my head, every creak on the stair, he was coming to get me because I'd seen him. I thought he was going to come and get me and shut me up because I was saying to people, I've seen this thing, and nobody would believe me. But if you grow up with it as a child and then you experience it again later on in life, it becomes the norm, which is, I know is ridiculous to say, but I bet it become your norm at your grandmother's because it's just life, isn't it?
Yes.
And there's days when you don't feel it and days when you do feel it, and you just somehow, it becomes ordinary life to you. And then those stories, if you don't share them, they go into obscurity. They just vanish in the midst of time, I'm just going to put the light on. It's getting a bit dark here. We're only just into spring in the UK, so it's getting... Oh, sorry, one sec.
Oh, you're fine. Another thing too is you develop a routine, like we learned that you don't go out in the pasture by yourself. Whenever it starts getting late evening, you go in the house. At nighttime, you turn the TV down. You put the blankets over the windows. You're quiet in the house. You don't run. You don't stomp. I mean, it just becomes normal. It's not like, weird. After a point, you're just like, this is what we have to do because that's out there and that's what we have to do,
Just living under siege. Isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Oppression almost. Yeah. And then you've got to get on the school bus the next day and go to school. You've got to go to work. You've got to do the fields. You've got to hunt that day. You've got to just carry on and be normal and don't cause a problem about it. It's just, to me, it's just absolutely ridiculous. It's like, if we could just have these conversations normally, like with just maybe around, you're around your friends or your cousins, or you're at the gym or you're at the band, you just have this normal conversation. I think it'd be a lot easier for people. And then they'd also have like that background of history to fall back on. So like for us in the UK, when you see something, there are no bears. There's nothing in the UK bigger than a Highland cow, say. Yeah? You don't have moose or elk or anything like that. So there's nothing for us to mix these creatures up with. So when people say, oh, you probably misidentified, you can't mix up a black and white cow and a 7-foot tall, solidly thick, muscular dog man that's chasing you, doing a 70 mile an hour and keeping up with the car. People told me I saw a homeless man. I would have known. I'm not that type of girl. If he'd have been a homeless man, he'd have been the one running. I'm telling you now. If he'd have been a lad, I thought when the bush moved, I thought it was going to be a teacher because I should have been in school and I truanted that day. And that's why I saw him. And my parents were very strict, but I was so scared of seeing him. I literally went home and told my mum that I hadn't been in school and that this had happened to me. And that it was just so unbelievable. But I thought, when that bush moved, I thought it was going to be a teacher and he was going to go, right, you're in trouble. Like, come back to school, you take me to the headmaster and that. So I wasn't frightened or anything until it leant out of that bush, and then my whole world just absolutely changed. And like, I've never seen anything like this. He wasn't anything. He wasn't a man in a suit. He wasn't like an escaped gorilla from the circus. He looked like a man and an ape that had been pushed together. He looked like Neanderthalish, but also like a monkey. He was completely covered in hair. Like, I saw him from ear up, and it was a hair, really dark brown auburny hair, and he had a huge jawline, normal teeth like a human, no fangs or anything like that. He wasn't dog-like in any way. He looked flat like a human or a monkey would look. His nose was sort of like a boxer's, kind of squashed down and a bit flared. He had amber-coloured eyes, and he looked as shocked as I looked. I'm going to be honest. He looked a bit taken aback, and I looked a bit taken aback. And that were it. I pushed my friend to the floor as quick as I could so we'd get her, and I jumped up and I ran. Honestly, that's what I did. I was like, and I was running in the opposite direction. And I looked back to see if he was coming after me, and she was running in the opposite direction. And he just melted into the green like that, and he was gone. Wow. Completely gone. And then 2 years later, I mean, I didn't find this out for like 30 years, but 2 years later, a woman older than me, I was only 15 when it happened to me. She was 30. She was walking her dog in the same place. And she said what she saw looked like a chimp, almost like a man and a chimp. And he was covered in hair from head to toe. He had male genitalia, no clothing on or anything like that. He had a pot belly, and he was kind of hunched forward. And he had this flat face and this boxer's nose. So me and her have clearly seen the same thing, but I don't know her and she doesn't know me. She's got in touch with Thomas Markham and the Crypto crew and literally reported her report to him. And then years later, obviously, when I'm a cryptozoologist and people know my name, he's contacted me and said, Deborah, have you seen this? And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly the same place. Not even just in the same town, in exactly the same place. And I just didn't know she was out there. And she said when she went home, she told her husband what she saw. And he said to her, they'll lock you up. If you tell people what you've seen, they will lock you up. And so she never did, you know, just absolute madness. I don't ever want to see it again. Mike, do you know the Sykesville monster? Have you ever done that case?
I haven't done that case.
If you look him up, Sykesville monster, I think it was 1983 in America, and a number of witnesses saw an upright, airy creature moving. So the police officers sat down with several of the witnesses and took their accounts, and they did almost like a falsify of the creature that they'd seen. So years have gone by, and I wasn't on YouTube by then, but I was collecting reports of other people in the UK and across the world. And I was like working with Iger then, and I'd cottoned on with John Green and stuff. So I was learning all the Bigfoot stuff. And I'm scrolling through. I'm always trying to find something that looked like him, so I can kind of get out of my head onto paper what I saw that day. And nothing's ever right, you know. When I'm Googling, and I see this face. And I didn't have time to read it. I just threw the laptop to the floor. I was a grown woman. Started crying. Like, I was right back to that moment. I kept saying to my husband, that's him. That's him. That's who I saw. That's who I saw. That's him. That's all I could say. That's him. So I got that photo of it, and I got Alex Evans. She's an American digital artist. And she said to me, Debbie, if you tell me what to change, I'll get it as close to. And she did that for me. She kind of put a face together. It's not 100%, but it I don't like looking at it because it looks like, say, maybe his cousin or his brother. It's so similar, but it's so similar to the Sykesville monster. How can I have seen something that looked like that in the UK the year before something that looked like that was seen in America? You know? And it takes me back to before we had the internet and people didn't speak. Every single country has the tale of the wolf in the woods, or a hairy, something like creature that will come to the house and steal your baby, or will, you know, take your livestock. And that was before global communication. So they've got to be in every country, haven't they? You know?
Yeah.
Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah.
Little Red Riding Hood. I wish somebody had told me that. Don't go in the park today.
You know,
go to school.
I was looking at something. I was an investigator for over 12 years. That's a job I did, and I try to base things based on, you know, the investigative techniques that you would use on humans. And I found that what's neat is some of the characteristics of these cryptids is they do have a pattern. They do exhibit patterns. And another thing too, and I don't know this to be true or not, but I have a theory. Whenever I look at the attacks here in America and the ones that I have studied and looked into on the unknown dog attacks and stuff, you know, Brenda Hamilton, a little boy that we done, I noticed that the movies always say that these attacks happen on a full moon. And what I'm finding is the waning and the gibbous seem to be when most attacks happen. And one of the theories I came up with is if that is true, maybe they're using the low light because they're able to see in low light a lot better than us. So they have every sensory during that time. They have the advantage in everything. And on a full moon, you know, we can see relatively good. So that's really not an advantage to them.
I just think they have an intelligence that we don't understand. They are absolute masters of their environment, you know, and they're connected to nature in a way that we're not. My husband says that they're more have more of an ability to live on this earth than we do. They don't need homes, they don't need clothing, you know, they don't need any of the things that us human beings need to exist on this planet. They just naturally exist here. And I think if there was ever a time where we actually did communicate, I think the things we could learn from them, plant-wise, for example, would just be amazing. And even there are reports where they say they like come out at the new moon, so it's almost like a celebration to them. You know, that in kind of January, springtime for us in the UK is when everything's coming back to life again, and that's kind of when the reports will start up again. So you see them kind of end around November, harvest time, and we get this cooling off period, and it's dark and there's nothing happening in the woods and no reports are coming in. And then we get to January and we start to see footprints within the woodland again, and you see it kind of follow the food as it ripens up the country, because there's a huge difference in the UK between the south and the north. Very, very different. So almost as different as, say, that's Washington State and Texas. The climate is incredibly different as you move up the UK, and you see the site reports start in the warmer places. That's an intelligent animal that is moving with its food source, as the early humans would have done. We did not sit in one cave for 365 days a year. That did not happen. You see it with the Native Americans. They have camps. You have a summer camp, a winter camp, a fishing camp, a deer camp, an elk camp. That's what you did. You moved where the food was because you had to. You were a hunter-gatherer. And they are probably doing that same thing, because the majority of the sightings that we see, yes, are males. It's so rare to hear about a female. Are these males scouting out new areas as they go? And the females and the young are often a safer, secluded place. And we see them as they're sourcing that resource or checking out a new area. Because you said to yourself, when you and your son and your nephew were followed out of that wood, there'd been a drought, there'd been a difference. And then that's how Well, when Patty walked across Bluff Creek, there'd been a huge flood, and there hadn't been one for over 150 years. So the area was completely different for that time, for that period. You know, it was different than it had ever been before. And as a woman, I always questioned why she walked out and put herself in danger from Roger and, you know, from the guys on the horses. I would only do that if I had Young behind me. I'd say, right, you hunker down and I'll lead them off. And I'd circumvent and come back round. And I think that's exactly what she was doing that day. And I think that's why she looked back. I think she was making sure that her young were hid, and she just took one for the team, as you say in America. I honestly believe that with every fibre of me being. So she could have just stayed hidden and they wouldn't have seen her. They would just not have seen her.
Right.
You know, she's put herself at risk for a reason, hasn't she? And you'd only do that for somebody you loved, I think. If it's okay with you guys, I've got about 10 minutes, May, I'm afraid, and then I'm going to have to hang up and go. I've got another interview to do. So
that is fine. These chairs are hard to set in for me for a long time, anyways. For a super long time. Me and Jesse always say, "Oh, my back."
If you ever want me to come back on, just tell me and I'll come back on.
I'll
always make time. Yeah. I've not told you about any paranormal cases yet, Jess. Wait till I get onto them.
Well, yeah, we definitely want you to come back, because when you're talking paranormal, again, at my granny's, everything that happened would not be associated as what I would call cryptid. There was a paranormal, supernatural, whatever you want to call it, side of it. And I was reading, and they say that most people that have a cryptid encounter, approximately 25% of them will have a supernatural encounter.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was really interesting to me. But what do you think their interest in children is? That's one of the biggest questions I get.
Yeah, why do children see them? Or I'll work with children who see wolves, wolf-like beings in the bedroom. Or they've got this abject fear of a wolf and they don't know why. You know, what is their interest? But we often hear of Bigfoot doing that as well, like watching children playing. Is it just simply that any animal on this planet that's young, it speaks to you, doesn't it? I mean, I've seen a chimpanzee at the zoo put her arms out to a newborn baby. It's a newborn baby. It's like new life, isn't it? Children are innocent, and you know. Is it that? Is it just the joy it's seeing them? Because if we saw mum or dad, we'd be looking at an 8-foot, thickly muscled, massive thing that could snap you in two. But if we were looking at two juveniles, we'd see them very differently, wouldn't we? We'd watch them, we'd find joy within that. And I really do think it's that. And there are cases, we have to touch on it, don't we, like Serafina Long and things like that, where there even talk of them taking children. If they are a blood relative of ours, if they are on that hominid line, there may have been, in times past and now, where there has been an intermating of the two species. And it is possible. And we can't prove it either way, can we? But the DNA sample that's in Berkeley University is 96% known female, as in like human, 4% unknown. So what is that 4%? And the closest they got it to is a giant lemur, believe it or not. It's just absolutely fascinating. I don't think in my lifetime I'll ever get my answer as to what they are, but I do think younger generations will. I think because technology is catching up so much, I think over the next 10 to 15 years we're going to have some massive evidence finds, you know, that are brought forward. I really do.
Yeah.
You know, passed down through the native stories that I was told, you know, from my grandpa and them, that, you know, they used to talk to them and they used to trade with them, and they used to, you know, they were so human that they didn't call them an animal. They actually called them a tribe. They called them, you know, cannibals, because they said they were eating their children and eating their women. And he said, you know, that's what caused this big, you know, whatever you call it, the separation. Yeah. And he blamed some of that on the white settlers that came in. And he said he thinks, you know, what caused a lot of that was there became a lot of competition in that area for resources and food. I mean, it was good for whenever it was just them, but whenever everybody else showed up with their guns and they were killing more animals and harvesting more plants, well, it became, you're going to feed your children, you're going to make sure your family eats.
We have a
Yeah.
human brain and we think with a human brain. But early man were cannibals. We know that because we've got bone finds where the bones have been open and they've taken the marrow out, and there are 2 marks within those bones. Some cultures believe that eating the dead is a very respectful thing to do. So it's how we think about things as humans. Early cavemen like Neanderthalis and Heidelbergensis, they had a grave routine. They mourned their dead, and back in the day they might do something like lay them out on top of a hill. We call it a sky burial, just so you naturally go. It's just that we don't understand their culture because we don't know it. It's like when we come across you never come across a tribe in the Amazon. They find you first. But when they found you and took you back to the village, they will have their own rituals around birth, marriage, death, and we won't understand them. We'll see them as barbaric or wrong because we're seeing them with a different eye. They don't know any different. In the same way that Mike didn't know any different growing up, they don't know. It's their culture. That's what they do within their culture. It's completely natural for them. And there are tribes still out there, undisclosed, what we haven't found, that are probably acting out on eating the dead or their enemies. You got that one, haven't you, where they kill their enemy and then they partake of the dead. I think it's frightening as a human being to imagine that goes on, but it did, and it did for us. It's probably only about 400 or 500 years ago we were eating each other. If you're desperate, in a desperate situation, you will do anything to survive, and that's what we're bred to do. That's what our DNA tells us to do, isn't it? The survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
My husband's
Yeah,
making
the government, done studies. Yeah, I mean, the government even done studies, that they, if the world was to shut down, that it would only be, such amount of hours before total chaos would ensue and people would actually start eating each other. They said that would actually happen because
I don't think it would
people
take
will go into
hours.
survival mode.
It's like lab rats, isn't it?
No, I mean, they have it set to a certain amount of hours to where you expect, you expect like, social collapse. Then you have your rioting, and then you have your civil unrest, and then you have, the food is, stolen from everywhere, so there's no food. And then people go into the robbing and the holding people up, and then it goes into they start eating each other when the food is gone because people have a survival instinct. Just like the movie, what was it? Alive? Those people on that airplane, they had to eat, people to survive.
And the Donner Party in America,
they
had no choice, They were left with no choice. By accident, they ended up snowed in, and there was nothing else they can do. And I know, as a mother and a grandmother, if I was in that situation, I would say to my children, if I go, you eat me. You do whatever you need to do with me to get out of here safe and alive. I think it's human nature, isn't it? People will say, "Oh, I couldn't eat a rabbit." So I was brought up in back in the day. We ate rabbits, hare, pigeon. If it moved, it got shot and we ate it. And if I say that to some people, they go, "Oh no, I couldn't. No, I couldn't eat a rabbit, or I couldn't eat a squirrel or anything." Well, then you've never been hungry. You've never been truly gut hungry, because human beings get really good and resourceful when we are in need of food or water. People kill themselves over a well, don't they? Who owns what well and who owns what water? Because that's what we like, As I said it before, survival of the fittest. And these animals, these creatures, beings, whatever name people want to put on them, are no different to you and I. They just want to live their life with no interference from anybody else, and to raise their young and just go about doing what they're doing. And personally, for me, I can see the change coming. I can see less people out there hunting them, trying to kill them, and more people are out there trying to learn from them and to work out what's going on, and like to see if Some people would see Mike's situation as absolutely wonderful and would give anything for it because they haven't experienced it and they didn't go through it. But the idea of seeing a cryptid is what they want to do. And I get that. It's human curiosity in it. It's human beings. We want to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
So I'm going
sometimes
to love
whenever
you
we
and leave
find
you
out, we
now.
wish we
I've
wouldn't
got to go and
have.
take my diabetic meds.
Yep,
No,
I know
I've got
you
to
got to
take
get going.
Yeah,
I
I've
know
got
you
to
got to
take
get going.
It's my diabetic meds. I have to have them at a certain time. I have a machine in my arm now. So it'll start beeping in 3 minutes. You're going to hear a beep like a phone. I need to go and set everything. But yeah, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you both.
Yes. Yes. I'm
Well, we
so glad you
appreciate
came
you coming
on
on, and we
joined us.
will have you. Yeah,
Yeah, just shout.
we're
Just
definitely
message
going to
me
have you
again.
back. I think we got a lot more.
Yeah, and jump in. Give me a list of questions, and I'll jump back in again. Yeah, I'm
All
sorry I have to go. It's just
We will.
unfortunately I'm getting old.
It's okay. Thank you, Deb.
See you again.
You have a
Bye.
great day.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Lot of information right there. That was really, really fun. It's one of those where it's like talking to Travis. I could just keep going and going and going because she has so much information. Um, and it's people like her that need to be interviewed to get that information out, because that is a lot of information that needs to be shared and it needs to be put out, I believe. And I believe that a lot of information is lost, because people don't take the time to interview the people that are in the woods that are experiencing it. And I'm going to get hit for this. I know I'm going to get hit for this, but this is not a dig at nobody. This is an honest opinion. If you don't go out from behind the desk and you don't go to the field and you don't experience it, all you're talking about is what somebody told you. You have to go out. You got to get your hands dirty. You got to experience it, because when you experience it, whenever you receive those encounters, you're going to know by the wording if it's real or if it's BS, because you're going to build a pattern. You're going to build a case, and you're going to know the liars from the non-liars. We need to, and this is where I want my channel to move to. I want to move away from entertainment and into truth. I want to find the answers. I want to not, go on and take stories and, over exalt them to make them, fascinating and add, music and flashing lights. I simply want the truth in a setting, just like what she just said. We need to sit around and we need to visit like normal humans in regular conversation. And that's the way we will learn the best, and by getting out and getting our hands dirty.
And that's why I love listening to her stories and her encounters and her research that she's done. If you haven't checked out her channel, make sure you do, because she's got years of research and going out and actually doing her own boots on the ground, per se.
And if anybody here wants to re-listen to the show, it will be on our YouTube. I know I'm probably going to go back and rewatch this one and take notes. And I'm also going to put this on Spotify. If any of y'all would like to listen to it on Spotify, we do have a Spotify that we put all of our interviews on. So if you would like to go back and listen to those also. I was amazed at just how all these fit together. I mean, plumb, across the ocean. And it reaffirms my theory to the Nephilim by them being so much alike that they come from the same places. And that's going to roll me into telling y'all next month, not this month. This month we're doing a Patreon drop, but next month, if you really, really want to see something deep, our Patreon will be the place to be, because we're going to go into the pyramids like nobody has. And it's all going to link to what we're dealing with in the woods right now to present day. We're going to go all the way back, and we're going to show that it still has an effect on what we're dealing with today. So that's going to be a really, really good one. I could never drop that live. I would drop it if I could. No way will they let me drop that one or the one we're going to drop this month. No way. My channel would be shut down. because the last Patreon video we done, the people that went and viewed it that are on our Patreon, they all said the same thing. Oh yeah, I see why you didn't drop it now, because they would have shut you down. Unfortunately, we have a line on the sand as podcasters that we can't cross, and we can bring you to it, but we can't go past it. But we can go to Patreon and we can put it all out there. Tomorrow we have another guest on live. We are going to have, who is it, Jesse? You remember?
Tomorrow we have tomorrow's Monday. Amanda will be here.
We have a guest on tomorrow. Amanda, the Bigfoot lady, is going to be here, and we're going to be picking her brain tomorrow. So I'll throw Jesse under the bus some more. And I think we even have another live after tomorrow, right in a row. Another guest.
Tuesday. Yes, we have Justin Decker.
Yep, Justin Decker is going to come on, and he's going to tell everybody what it was like actually being raised in the Amazon jungle, guys. And he sent a slideshow that we're going to get uploaded, so that should be a really, really good live. Guys, I'm going to jump off here. I got some recording to do for Wide Open Adventures. We're working on that channel really hard, and I'm not used to doing a live in the middle of the day right now. But look, guys, we done really good. I'm really happy, and the support is great. So we thank you guys. If you haven't subscribed, I'd like to invite you to, subscribe to our channel, ring the bell, select all, so you get all of our notifications and everything that we're up to. And I guess, Jess, if you want to, you can walk us out of this one.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Much appreciated. I love the support. We wouldn't be here if you weren't here. So thank you. God bless everybody. Make sure you stay healthy, safe in this weather, whatever you're having. And I will pin the channel in the chat after the, unless you do it, Mike, in the chat for BBR.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So,
definitely go check her out. Yeah,
yes.
Definitely go check her out. Subscribe, support her. She has a lot of great information. She's a really nice lady, a wealth of information. It was really a pleasure visiting with her. Janny, thank you very much for that. God bless you for that donation. But as always, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys. And without your support, it wouldn't matter. And we have shown time and time again that our abnormal family has a great core following, and we appreciate that. We're growing every day. I approved about 50 people today, and it continues to grow. So we are on the uphill. Thank you all very much. I'm going to go get busy with Logan. We're going to go film, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. I almost said good night because I'm used to doing late night shows. And if you would, we got a new one. I was reminded last night by somebody. We got green hearts for Logan. We got purple hearts for Hunter. And now we have red hearts for Legan, guys. So we appreciate the hearts, and we'll see you on the next one. Good night, and God bless.
Goodbye, everybody.